GSN's first pre-Congress Hangout for 2016. My name is Paul Schmidt, and I'm the Executive Director for the Green Spa Network. For those of you who may not know about our organization, the Green Spa Network is a nonprofit organization, and we're dedicated to promoting the natural connections between personal vitality, economic prosperity, and the health of planet Earth. We do many things to support innovation, inspiration, and action for a sustainable future through spas and the wellness industry. And one of GSN's best offerings is our Congress gathering. We've been doing this for 9 years now, and this year's event will be at the beautiful Devil's Thumb Ranch in the Rocky Mountains outside of Denver in Colorado this September. So now in its 9th year, as I mentioned, we'd like to make Congress more than just another conference or trade show. And it's designed as an immersive experience to really connect and integrate with people's lives. So not just be an addition or something that you bolt on to your life, but something where you bring your life there and bring your insights and inspiration home. So one of the ways that we do that is by extending the learning both before and after the event. And Hangouts are one of the ways that we do that. So for today, I'm excited to be here with 4 amazing women who will be part of one of our learning tracks at Congress this year on the future of women in leadership, which is key to success in sustainability. So please, little housekeeping note, if you haven't been on a Hangout before, please familiarize yourself with the Q&A function in your Hangout window. You can use that to communicate questions or comments to our panel. And I'm just really excited about this. I was actually just sharing with the team before the call here that I was working on a Congress communication this morning, and I just want to go. There's so much to share about it. So this particular track is very rich, and we were actually on a call last week with a group of women who are going to be participating. And the energy just kept building and building, and it got so exciting that we really just had to do a hangout and invite other people and develop the ideas even a little bit further. So without further ado, I will turn this presentation over to GSN's founder and one of the most influential leaders in my life, Tara Grojesk. Tara.
Thank you, Paul. Wow. So welcome, everyone. We're really excited to be sharing this time with you today. As Paul mentioned, this is the Hangout is an opportunity to get a little preview on Congress and some of the programming that we're developing for our big event in September. And really, I wanted to share a little bit about how this forum, Women in Leadership, came to be, because obviously, I mean, it has started years prior. There were discussions about a mentorship program for women in leadership, and that was welcomed with great enthusiasm, but it wasn't able to get executed at that time. And then last year at Congress, there were a lot of women just having side conversations about the need for some dialogue like this. And it really sparked my attention more than that. It hit a chord for me because some of you know that I've been leading women's retreats for the last 13, 14 years for the spa industry and now for communities. And I really believe that women love to come together. They need to come together and gather and share their wisdom. And with my stepping back from an active role on the board of GSN and stepping back from co-chairing the Congress event, not that I don't have plenty of other things that I'm doing, but it just felt really right for me to help champion this project of bringing women together for a very important conversation about cultivating women in leadership. And so we started talking about having that be at Congress. I got very excited about it. And then I reconnected with Carolyn Pars. Carolyn has been a presenter at our Congress a few times, and she has a very strong background in marketing. And one of the things that really impressed me in the work that she's done over the years is she has a program called Women of Green, and she did podcast interviews of women entrepreneurs and women social changers and women go-getters, really playing incredible roles in the world and moving social change and making a difference on the planet. And I was so impressed with her interviews and the network of women that she had created and gathered around her, that we just kept talking with each other, staying in contact, and she was able to do some presentations at Congress in the past. But I recently reconnected with her only to find out that we were yet still aligned and on track together with her work and her program, Women as Game Changers. And I'll ask Carolyn to share a little bit about that. We'll be talking a lot about that. And it just seemed like a perfect dovetail to the GSN Women in Leadership Forum, that we could learn and be inspired by the work that she's been doing and the programs that she's been developing with this conversation. And so Carolyn is going to be co-facilitating our forum at Congress, and this hangout is an opportunity to get to know her a little bit better and the work that she's been doing, and talk a little bit about how it does dovetail with our issues in the spa industry for women in leadership. So with that, Carolyn, would you share a little bit about your work and your program?
Thank you, Tara. Yes, we have been paralleling each other. And here we are again on a very juicy topic, women in leadership. And we have, right this week, the Democratic Convention, right, with the first elected nominee as a women leader for our country. So it's all so perfect. So yeah, let me just give you a little background. Women of Green came out of just hearing stories of women. I would be coaching women in the green space and business, and story after story arose from that. And I thought, I got to get this out there. I'm a communicator. I got to communicate. And so I started with a podcast with the women that I was coaching, and then it went beyond that. And there were threads there that so often that why women start businesses or why they go into certain types of businesses, and this constantly intrigued me. So Women of Green right now is a multimedia blog, and it's about turning up the volume of the feminine voice on the planet as it appeals to green and sustainability. Right? It isn't Mother Nature for nothing, right? So out of that grew Women as Game Changers, right? And that was an online summit that I co-produced with the U.S. Green Chamber this past spring. And why it became a little bit more broader is because the women that would come into my sphere, I mean, many of them were environmentalists, but many of them were social activists as well, or believed in social causes or social entrepreneurship, or brought social activities into their workplace, right? And so it was broadened, so the women that are just making amazing changes and the difference on the planet, right? And what they were doing and how they were doing it, was it different than what was happening right now in the workspace? And I wanted to know. So we did this summit, invited 27 powerful, game-changing women, from Nell Newman, Paul Newman's daughter, Newman's own, to Priscilla Woolworth. If you all remember the Woolworth 5 and 10 store, and on and on. And so there were threads from those interviews. We did dozens of interviews and learning what moved them. Why did they, businesses or the organizations? And there was one common thread that came out of that, which was when you grow a business or a department or an organization, when you grow that from what you love most, and sometimes it's what's broken your heart the most, but what's deeply inside your heart, you transform yourself. These women were being transformed, and the world. So they're transforming the self and the world. And this was the theme that happened over and over. That's what we were attracting. And of course, the Green Spa Network is just filled with women who have that passion, not for the environment, but also it connects to a very deep place within. It's purpose-driven and values-driven. And so out of the summit, what also emerged was, I saw 4 practices that each one of these women would do, right? And it started with just consciousness, right? They all had like their own, whether it's a spiritual or meditation or personal practice they did. This is like the inner game to game changing. Each one of the women had that. And then it was actually 4 C's. The second C is claiming your power, right? So it went from interconnection to actually claiming their power in the workspace, claiming their power in their life. And the next is connection, and we love to connect, we love to share, relationship building. That's how women are doing it, right? They have support systems around there. And then the final C was collaboration, right? So now they not only making connections, but they're working with others to form something greater. Sometimes it's a project, sometimes it's a movement, but really using the power of connection and collaboration. So we're going to do another summit, and that summit is about changing the game and creating a new game. And that question is hanging on my consciousness, and I wanted to also bring it through to this and just see what's happening in women's leadership in the context of the spa industry, and what changes, or where we're at now. What is it different that we're doing with men? How do we integrate the feminine and the rise of the feminine and the masculine voices? So all of this and more. I'm excited to be part of the conversation.
That's great. Thank you. I also wanted to include Bonnie today in this conversation. Bonnie Baker is Vice President of Green Spa Network, and Bonnie was on our Women Lead call that we had last week in preparing for the forum discussion for Congress. And you know, it was a very dynamic conversation that we had with quite a few women, but I thought maybe Bonnie could share some of her thoughts about women in leadership and some of the highlights from our conversation.
Yes, good morning. I hope everyone can hear me fine. I feel much like Paul does. I just want to jump into all these conversations and get into Congress and meet everybody, and have this dynamic just continue on. Some of the things that have been so powerful, both through Carolyn's messages and in speaking with the women, the call last time, were this idea of, just as Carolyn mentioned, the integration and how women support each other in our work, and how, it's a very collaborative type of environment. And another thing that's so interesting is how, we're really in this game changing, or in changing the dynamic in the workplace, is that it's not a competition with men. It's actually, looking to bring us together more and have, both the male and female participation in its place, and have us do the collaboration together rather than in a competitive environment, or rather than us trying to stake a claim for women. I feel that that's one of the strongest messages, because we're not here to revive, let's say, the old feminist movement, maybe. We're actually looking to create a new movement, and one that is, it's the unification of these, this yin-yang energy. And that's really interesting, and I think that that's one of the most powerful pieces of all of this, and in the conversation we're having. I also think that us being able to stand firm in our voice, and saying that, the women's voice, or the women as game changers, it's not about the kind of the soft piece of femininity. It's about the very strength in femininity. It's about the strength in the woman's voice, and holding, very firm and steadfast in what we need to say. I think it was actually Rose that mentioned on the last call that, she finds that there's a lot more respect for her in the business environment when she's actually firm, and she doesn't give an excuse, and she doesn't, try to soften around the edges, and just to be very firm. And it reminded me a little bit of how I have to be in the mothering role. I have to be firm, and I have to say no, and I have to stand by that without any excuses. So those are some of the things that really stood out for me, and that got me very excited in how we're engaging in a different way at this point in time.
I wanted to, it's hard not to use reference of the political process that's happening right now, and, regardless of your political persuasion and who you're for and against, but, the challenge, I think, for Hillary Clinton as a woman to have that strong persona, that strength and the toughness and all of that, but still that feminine side. And it's sort of been interesting recently to be watching how, her challenge with that of how she presents herself. But I also wanted, it made me think of that when you were speaking, but I also wanted to comment on GSN, because very early on in our mission and our vision and our values, we stated that we wanted to be inclusive rather than exclusive. And I'm not saying that that's more female than male at all, but I think that some of the values that were infused into the organization are, the feminine in all of us, this inclusion and envelopment. And I just now I'm going, oh, aha, this is great to reflect back on that. And for those of you that are new to the GSN organization, this has been something that we have been trying to communicate to the spa industry, that it's not about how green you are, and we don't evaluate how green a spa is or a product company is, but rather we hope to include you in learning and growing and progressing on the path, so that we all can make progress together and we can support each other and not reinvent the wheel. This is one of the very first objectives, is we didn't want to have to reinvent the wheel. There are many other industries that are very strong in greening and sustainability practices, and we wanted to learn from them and collect those resources and share it with one another, rather than each entity trying to start from scratch. And thus the word network, being connecting the dots and being connected to one another and learning and growing together. So that's just a spontaneous reflection that I have on our organization, and I think it does, it's sort of a feminine aspect of who we all are, male and female. And the other word that we've used a lot is collaboration. And interesting enough, it's part of our theme at Green Spa Network. Conscious collaboration. We've used it in the past for one of our themes too. The collaboration is so important, and how we work together. So I don't know, I just had that reflection on our organization and Congress, that alliance and inclusion and collaboration and connecting are at the core of who we are. So I just wanted to comment on that. Paul, I don't know if you have any comments or want to prompt us with any questions.
Sure, and again, I'm finding this super exciting, and speaking up as a male in this conversation, and just to identify that, the reason I'm so excited and actually attracted to GSN and this industry to begin with is because of that feminine principle, and to me, actually, this conversation is compelling because it stands to clarify what can be super confusing for me, and it might go to the masculine feminine principle and gender and how that's playing out in this transition. And I was raised I was raised by women. I did not have a lot of male influence in my life, and so it's no wonder that I found the spa industry and that I found a talent for touch and nurturing and bringing a feminine principle or a feminine energy or nurturing energy to my massage practice when I started out in this industry 30 plus years ago, and that was very important to women and men that I touched, because all too often male touch in our society is either missing or violent, and so I was able to provide an alternative to that for people that was deeply meaningful. And I've had to put more conscious effort into developing my male side and relating to that. So I'm eager for this conversation, and I think our industry is too, because there are a lot of powerful women in our industry and powerful leaders, and from my point of view, some of them present as men and have been successful in a male-dominated leadership structure or in a C-suite because they've been able to posture that way, and that gets confusing for me, because because it's more than that. You know, as Bonnie said earlier, it's about, as the Native American tradition looks at it, it's about a bird that's been flying with an overdeveloped wing that is now learning to fly with two wings, masculine and feminine. So. So just throwing all that stuff out there, let's start with Carolyn, and one of the questions that's coming through. I think this is from one of the folks that was on the call last week. So Carolyn, what have you discovered from the interviews and research that you've done about women in business and women in leadership?
I want to answer that question, but I want to make a comment to what you just said, because I love what you said about, you know, getting in touch with your feminine side, right? I need to get in touch with my feminine side too. So I've been in business. I've been in business since I was in my 20s, and I've been in the business world. And you think, well, we innately got the anatomy, right? And we should be nurturing and warm and fuzzy. And I have to say, I have to work at that for myself, and maybe that's why I have all these women organizations that I'm part of, because that feminine side it needs some space. It needs some help. Just as on a personal level, for business. I mean, business I do it well, and I personally want to see more of that accepted. But in my personal life, my boyfriend has more feminine qualities than I do. Maybe that's why the universe put us together. I don't know. But so I think back to women in business, right? And Hillary, you brought up Hillary, Tara, right? That I remember I had one of those power bows that I wore, and I worked in New York City advertising agencies, right? And I really had to take on the principles that were laid out, and we go into this. It was male-dominated as far as what was at the top, right, of the people that were making the decisions. Yet the whole industry that they were selling to was female, because women buy 80% of the consumer products, right? But the guys at the top were just what the message is for them. And that felt like a disconnect to me, but I zoomed right into that, and I really took on the role, a lot of masculine roles of that throughout the years. And I think as an older, many years later, I am finding my own feminine side, not only in business, but in my personal life. And that is true for a lot of the women that are super successful, making a lot, often making money out there, winning the game of business. They, on a personal note, need to balance that out for themselves, and they're seeing that in their personal relationships. When my kids get mad at me, whatever, it's like I'm called the CEO. The CEO? And I'm like, oh no, that's a negative thing. In business, it's all like, woohoo, we can take care of that. But life is a balance between both of that. So in business, I do sometimes better in those relationships when I have to go into a male-dominated. But that's what I want to see a change in, where some of those feminine qualities in myself and in the boardroom, in these boardrooms, are embraced. Statistics. There's tons of business cases where more women at the C-level or at decision-making level that are on the board or making decisions, the company is more prosperous and more integrated, right? So we have, the case has been made, but we're still getting there. So, and I think a lot of I want the other business women on here to chime in with that and see, like, what was their journey as well. That's what I found out in the summit. That was one of those places where, like, how feminine can I be here, right? Especially raising money for my new venture.
That's
I'd like
awesome.
to jump in there.
CEO, I think CEO stands for Caring Empathetic Officer. Am I right? Just saying.
I like that.
I want to jump in there to really support what Carolyn just said, and also what Paul just said. Interestingly enough, I find that a lot of times the women in our industry, in our spa industry, that are successful or that have taken on a more corporate role or a spa director role, they are losing touch with those earlier, qualities that brought them into the industry anyway. We become much more competitive. We have to answer to the same, statistics and numbers and the qualities that maybe we didn't come from when we started in therapy or when we started in the touch realities, and so that oftentimes is a real place of conflict for us, even if we're not in the operational environment like in the spa. But I know, Tara, starting your own company, running a business that creates products and distributes products, and you're still wanting to be really in touch with the personal relationships, but sometimes that's really hard, and I think that that's a place in our industry that really needs to evolve, that we have to find a lot more balance in that, both for women and men, because there are certainly a lot more men in leadership roles in the spa industry as well. But I find that there's a real similarity there with sustainability in business as an additional point, because so often we hear, founders or owners or some of the people that we're interacting with say, well, we don't want to go sustainable, or we won't make a decision on green because it'll cost more, or we won't have the bottom line, or we won't have the results that we're looking for. And so when we switch the conversation about sustainability, it takes on some of those same issues as women in the workplace, being able to have a more across the board bottom line, triple or quadruple bottom line, or having more integrity and more integration in our business practices. So interestingly enough, women and sustainability, that whole piece goes quite a bit together in decision making nowadays.
I just wanted to add to all of that. In our Women Lead phone call that we had last week, quite a few women, and particularly I remember Rose and Rihanna Riego commenting on this challenge of leading. Rihanna was commenting that it's very difficult for her to not try to lead like a man and be like a man. I guess I just wanted to say this is a big topic for women, definitely, in how we balance that. And I loved what you said, Carolyn, about working on developing our feminine side. That we need to do that too. So I think this is a big topic for women in leadership, is how to use the strengths of both the feminine and masculine energies to lead in a balanced way. And this is true for men also. So I'd like to see us discuss this more, and I'm sure it will come up in our forum again. There was definitely one on my list. I had written in, just so everyone knows, I had posed some questions to the women in our lead call, and one of those was, how do women lead without being like men? But what are the strengths? What are the positives that we take from that? It's not all positive, negative on either side, right? But it is just very interesting to see that there is that tendency that I can accomplish and achieve and excel and get to the top of my career, if I do it like a man. So women are challenged with that.
Men are too. How do men lead without being like a man?
Right.
I'm challenged with that every day, because men are increasingly judged, in our world. That's what I'm saying about these layers. As this emerges, it's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to ask a question to Carolyn, actually 2 questions, regarding your experience and the research that you've been doing, Carolyn, because it's very interesting to me to hear some examples of where you've seen like an actual example or an anecdote of this shift, this somebody actually living the change. I mean, I hate to do it, but Hillary Clinton's one of them. I mean, she's quite an example for women right now, regardless of your political tendencies. But I'd also like to ask you, your perception or your take on the negativity or the fear that surrounds a woman in a place of leadership. And they're afraid of your power, or your power intimidates somebody, and that type of thing, which you don't hear in the space of a male in leadership. So where does that come from, and where does that sit, and how can we change that game?
Yeah, those are 2 great questions. Let me start with the second one about the fear. This is what I personally noticed, and when we had conversations about that with the women that were on the summit, is that when we're more like males, we get less. That we can meet them on the masculine level, but sometimes like vulnerability comes in, and that connective, it actually can create more power, and power in a good way, not power over. So it's interesting that you have to meet somebody where they are, right? But the more, if it becomes an over masculine tendency, it actually can create less success in the workplace, right? Then she becomes, excuse my French, the bitch, or the domineering one, and those titles are given to us when a man does that, and he's like the powerful one. He's a great business guy. So I have noticed in my own practice is that when I use the word vulnerability, that's my own practice. I do it in my personal life more, and certainly in business. And I have to say right now, sometimes when I start feeling that like I can go into that masculine role, I'll stop and breathe, and just relax, and just get into my heart more, right? And then speak from there, and I notice the energy changes in the room, and it's more inclusive, and people listen to me more instead of being in the like willpower or the tough one. So that I've noticed that in business. Now I'm in entrepreneurial businesses mostly. I do work with corporations as well, but it's women at the top have to and want to take on more of their feminine roles. One of the women we interviewed on the summit was the Global Sustainability Director of Procter & Gamble. And she just became the VP. She's on the top tier. When I had personal conversations with her, she sent me a book. She goes, "We're sisters in this changing the boat around, right?" And so, like, there's a certain expectation that you have to hold, but I haven't seen an organization that's made the whole transition, the change of the game. It's in process. Just like in our political system, it's all in process, and we're the ones that are creating it right now. That's why this conversation is so amazing and juicy. We can create this. What does it look like, and how does everybody win, right, in the process of that?
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you.
While there's a break in the conversation, I'd like to step in and introduce Kate. So the other lovely woman in front of you on the screen here, the wonderful Kate Sorensen, who is GSN's newest staff member, and she's here as technical support and also part of the conversation. So forgive me for overlooking that earlier in the call, Kate, but welcome.
I'd like to jump in. Hey, Kate. I have another piece that I want to jump in on that came out of the summit that I'd like everyone's, especially in the spa industry, what your thoughts are on this. And the idea is about women supporting other women. One of my summit women does a green forum in LA, and she's a business owner, and she's found that when she was raising money and looked at a product that was a sustainability product, that she found that she wasn't getting support from other women in funding, even well, especially with money, but even on a business level, that she found that it just was the same old game, right? And so the question on women are now inheriting a lot of money, right? The largest intergenerational transfer of wealth is taking place right now. Mm-hmm. And women and millennials are holding much of the power there, right? So how can women support other women? What do we need to do that? And it's not about having a club, but we get into a competitive stance as well, right? So what's showing up in your industry around that?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I think that's one for you, Tara.
For me. No, I mean, I was just reflecting on my own personal experience of running a company that was female, all female, until a few years ago, and how we always said, until Richard Hill came and worked for me a number of years ago, we said, we need some female energy, male energy. We need some male energy to balance it out. There was cat fighting. There was a woman on my team that some referred to as a black widow because she would build cases against another until, trying to get them fired. I mean, really bizarre stuff. I mean, this is a long time ago, but just that reflection of the struggle that we had as all these women together, supposedly thinking that, wow, all woman company, and we're going to be supportive of each other, and we're going to grow together, and it was really rough. We're like, we need some men to balance this out. But so it was very challenging at that time. So I just, that was just my personal reflection in my process. And in the industry, I do think, as you were talking, Carolyn, I just couldn't help but think about that kind of cat fight, bitchiness that can happen, and why do women fall into that trap? And how can we break some of those patterns? Some of it is sibling rivalry from childhood. I mean, who knows where it's coming from? But there's this competitive nature that women have too that can be very destructive and harsh, really, I think, out of integrity. And how do we break those patterns so that we feel safe with each other and really do support each other instead of that destructive action that happens. So I'm just posing another question from that.
I find that I take some inspiration from looking at cultural traditions, and that's the anthropologist in me coming out and looking back towards community development and communities working together. And I really do find that for me, when I encounter a situation, and of course there have been many, of competitiveness and who's going to come out on top and all of this, I try to remember to myself that it takes a village. It's if you can have a group of people raising children, or if you can have a group of people that are nurturing a project along, and take it from that standpoint, it helps me to get out of the competition, and it also helps to see how we can nurture and support each of the different talents that are usually involved, and rather than looking at one talent being on top, having the wide breadth that everyone can bring to the development or the nurturing of the village. Anyways, I think also I'd love to hear Kate if you're able to comment on it too. Kate is a real upcoming rising star in the spa industry, and she's definitely been in a lot of different environments of our industry and been supporting our efforts, very much as a foundation in the Green Spa Network. So while you're here, Kate, anything you want to
add? Sure. First, I'll apologize if you hear dogs in the background. I tried my best to make them be quiet, but you can only do so much. So first of all, I apologize for that. Really enjoying the conversation, and definitely agree with what's already been said and shared about the inclusiveness, I think, and kind of how we bring both female and male practices, or however you want to say it, together instead of trying to be one or the other. And I think that's, intuitively, I think that's what drew me to this industry and continues to fuel my, growth and determination in staying in this industry. I don't feel like I'm being made to choose a lot of the time. I feel like I really have been able to find people in this industry that support both sides of that in my own growth, and really bonding to those. I had a very strong male in my life, and so I got a lot of those kind of tendencies and some stubbornness built in that might be seen as more male than feminine. And so I've actually had to do what others have said on this call, is actually cultivate my more feminine tendencies of caring and nurturing those relationships with other females. And I think that's been part of why I've gone on the path that I have in the spa industry, and some of the successes that I've had have been because I've had women around me to support and encourage both sides and both male and female attributes. and so I haven't had to really choose. I think I'm lucky in the fact that I really haven't had to feel, and I think this might be different. I really haven't had the experience where someone has told me that I am too much of this type of personality or too feminine. I haven't had it on either side, and I think that speaks a lot to our industry, and kind of the choices and the opportunities that I've had. And so I still get to learn that, and I think it also speaks to kind of that game changer that you all are speaking about, and kind of where the conversation is going, and I think that applies to not only this situation in women versus male versus female, but just kind of the global. It's more inclusive. We're breaking so many barriers everywhere that it kind of makes sense that we're at this time that it's not one or the other, and it's about both, and kind of how do we kind of merge those lines, instead of really try to differentiate them, and with those type of things becoming more popular in just general, whether it's politics or media, or the stories that are written, or our industry. I think it's inclusiveness and collaboration is definitely becoming a prime topic in everything, really. So not sure if that's
Yeah, that was great.
but that's kind of
great.
my experience. So
yeah, wonderful. I jotted down a few notes as you were speaking, Kate, and also went back to some of the comments that Bonnie and Carolyn made. Again, in reflecting on my, running a business as a woman and all of that, I was thinking, and Carolyn's question about what's happening in our industry. I wanted to comment that, I, as a product company or a resource supplier, and most of you know that I do not like the word vendor, because I feel that it's like a vending machine that you put some money in to get what you want, and until you use it up, and then you go select something else. It just doesn't feel like a mutual relationship. So one thing I wanted to say was, as a supplier in the industry, of course, we have competitors. I would often be asked by business advisors, and particularly one male business advisor that would say, who's your competition? And I never really had looked at it in my earlier years, for many, many years, didn't look at who my competition was. I just kept my vision and my focus and my purpose and my intention and my values and stayed with that. And I really wasn't paying attention to the competition around. And I think it was a healthy approach. But then I thought, the advisors are telling me I need to know, my competition, and I need to know my points of distinction, and I started becoming more sensitive to the competition. But I would say, for the most part, the majority of how I viewed my competition, I would always refer to as friendly competitors. The majority of them I would reference as friendly competitors, and it's a small industry, and I'd get to know who they are and what they stood for, what their values were, and I found that we had more in common than we had in difference. Yes, I needed to understand what the distinctions were in my products and our services and what we could provide in order to communicate that to the spa, to the spa directors and managers who are making purchasing decisions. But it was really, looking at our small community and appreciating and respecting who they were and what they were doing and what their intentions were, what their mission and values were. So I think this word, so one, I would just say friendly competition, but also a respect. And again, there's this contrast of what happens sometimes in our industry and in the world of politics, but the respect is a really big word for me. Also, I was going to say empathy, and understanding what's going on for the other, and being able to stand in the other person's shoes or view it from their perspective, I think has been a really big word for me. Speaking the truth. I just was reflecting on these things about how I've approached being a woman in business in the spa industry, and what the high values are. And so I think one of the conversations that we can have in our forum, and not that it will all take place at Congress, but hopefully to continue on, or what are these principles that we stand for, that both men and women stand for, And I really liked what Kate said about, I wrote down balance, you know, and we've all been alluding to it, the balance of the feminine and masculine energy. And I think that's when we're in that center and we're conducting business consciously is when we're in balance with both male and female. So you sparked a lot of notes for me.
I just had an insight, and I'll toss this out to anybody, but conscious collaboration, you know, we've been dwelling in that as a theme for this year's Congress, and really building a lot of marvelous different facets and access to that context at the event. But it just occurred to me that maybe, I'll just try this out off the top of my head here, the space of consciousness, and at least as we're talking about it right now, mindfulness, consciousness, maybe genderless.
Maybe what?
Genderless, maybe without gender.
Gender neutral.
Gender neutral would be a way to say it more appropriately. Thank you, Tara. And just as a space to go to. I guess I'm looking for common ground. I'm looking, you know, and still talking about it like there's opposing forces, which there aren't, you know. So the consciousness is about, that's where that integration maybe happens, and that's where that balance, and that's where that awakening happens. I'm not sure. Just throwing that out into this space. Thoughts?
Well, I mean, that's interesting that you present it like that, Paul, because I think that a lot of what's happening now in the social level, in all of these issues that are coming out, and a lot of the crises that we're seeing around the world is precisely that. It's a lack of consciousness. It's a lack of this ability of us to live in our bodies, to live in a real space, you know, to interact with the world from a place of body consciousness, you know. And for me, that's really, it really hits home, because that's what brought me into this industry in the first place. Was, as I mentioned earlier, I studied anthropology, and so for me, anthropology was a way to find common ground between peoples and cultures. I mean, you study the differences, but you also study a lot of what brings people together and their belief systems and their traditions and things like that. And where I found the most common denominators was in healthcare, in healing practices, and in understanding the natural world. And in searching for that, no matter what culture we're talking about, no matter what part of the world, there are all these practices that bring us together to these common roots, you know, meditation, breathing, interaction with plants, and with you know, the riches of the natural world. And those interactions and that ability to connect with a sensorial world brings us to a level of consciousness that guides our moral and ethical decision. And when we're disconnected from that, that's when conflict starts. That's when we start to differentiate from each other. So, you know, for me, that's a piece that just always comes back to being the center point. Underneath our skin, we all function the same way. Underneath it all, we've got the same amount of, you know, liver, heart, lungs, all of this. We've got the same gender. I mean, it's quite logical when you look at it from that way. So there's common ground that allows us to live in the world with health and well-being, or that allows us to take decisions that lead us to another place, that is depression, illness, and, you know, not being at ease. So I think that the essential part of this question is really what we've always been talking about anyway in the spa industry and the wellness industry. It's where sustainability goes back to its principles and roots, and it's that type of interaction, you know, in the respect, as Tara said, for different cultures, which is just kind of a superimposed way of interacting with the world. And it was really just a way of responding to an environment, you know, being able to stay alive in the different areas of the world where we've lived. So, you know, those are some fundamental questions that I think that we can take deeper in the forum, but we can also take it deeper into our work in the spa industry and the wellness industry, and especially in our work in the Greens Network.
I love the topic of genderless, because I think, or no gender, or integration of masculine and feminine, or just oneness.
Just my hang-up, yeah.
That's where we're heading, right? Isn't that where we're all heading, right? but we're not there yet. We can incorporate some of that on. I know I do that on an internal place, but when you look on the external, it's different, right? And I just want to. There's this video that was going around, and the video was they had 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old boys and girls, right? And they all did a job. They all worked together, and they all worked hard. And at the end, they said, "Okay, come on in." And they came into their living room, and they gave the girls, less money than the boys, right? And the girls were going, "That's not fair. Why don't I did the same amount of work as him?" And they were just getting their reactions, right? And one little Asian boy said, "I think everybody should get the same as if they work that hard, they should get the same." And I'm like, here's the future, right? So we're not there yet, right? Women still get 78 cents less to the dollar, right, out there than women do. That's why a lot of women are starting businesses twice the rate of men, because to create that level of balance. But we're to the genderless thing, we're on our way. But we also have to see where we are right now, and we can't just pretend it's not there, right? And the conversations have to continue. And I think industries like the spa industry totally can help make that happen, right? Versus some of really the heavily masculine industries.
Yeah. I wanted to add, because this is a really simple example, but in the women's retreats, are you hearing an echo from me now?
Mic issue, Nora.
Are you hearing it now?
That sounds better.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was just going to say a very simple example, but some men asked me years ago when I started my women's retreat for spa professionals why I wasn't including men, and at that time it was because women, they behave differently in front of men than they do women, and sometimes they behave differently with women. Sometimes people say women dress for women, like to impress women more than the men. But at the women's retreat, it was about a safety. If men are in the group, women will put their makeup on, or they'll fix their hair, or whatever. And when there weren't any men around, there was a little bit of a feeling of a safer environment to let it down, not be so self-conscious. It was a lot about self-image and being self-conscious. So I just think it's kind of interesting that we're not there yet, I guess is what I want to echo, is we're not there yet, and that women coming together and having these conversations is really important as part of our process and healing, whatever. But ultimately, I think what we're all talking about, and Paul, as you our male on the call, this balance, this consciousness, this genderless place is ultimately, maybe where we evolve to.
Yeah. Awesome. So we've got actually about 7 more minutes in our scheduled time, and we've got a lot of activity here coming from the folks watching. So
Yes.
One of our attendees is asking, I'm just going to read it straight out loud here, how do we move the conversation and shift the paradigm from gender-specific qualities, behaviors, and issues of male, female, men, women, dynamics, differences, and move towards a discussion on synergy and integration of all energetic elements of being human?
Yeah, I think that's sort of where we were evolving our conversation to. I think it really is that's exactly where we were evolving our conversation to, and I think if we have more time, we could delve into that, and I think we will. Carolyn, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly where we were moving into. I saw that question come up, and I'm like, you're right. You're absolutely right. I think, we're all humans, and if we were being attacked by aliens, I think the gender issue would go out the window, right? Then it would be them versus us. So anyway, it's a conversation. It happens also, this conversation is happening in Black America too. The differences between racial, the differences between gender. And, and I know it feels like we're cutting it up and dividing it up, But I look at the young ones, the millennials, right, and Kate right there, and my assistant, when I was having her do some Women of Green stuff, and she was like, well, why are you doing that? You know, that's not an issue. And I'm like, oh, baby, you're yeah. I remember when we were burning bras, okay? Do you remember that? You know, like, as we get older and, like, these new ones are coming in, I think this conversation is going to move on.
The change evolves.
Where we came from, right? That's so important, where we came from. And then the younger generation really, like, on the shoulders of them and go beyond this. So this conversation is a big one. But for me personally, I think it's important that it has to be said, it has to be spoken, so that there feels like there's like, oh, okay, here we are. Now how do we move to the next level?
Awesome.
And I actually, that's a good point that you bring up, Carolyn, because in thinking, you know, and sharing about my experience, and that I do have, you know, some naivety, if you will, or naivety, or however you say that, but, you know, or ignorance in the fact that I haven't had to deal with some of the circumstances that maybe you all have had to deal with, and sort of that male-female kind of roles. And I think it's really important that, you know, millennials, those my age and younger, participate in these kind of conversations so that we can learn from what has already transpired and build on that, like you were saying, and realize that, you know, I don't know what I don't know, but it's my responsibility to find out that information so that I can then build on that, and so that we don't replicate it or we don't move backwards at any time. And so I think if there are younger generations watching these type of videos, you know, it's really important that you stay in tune, you know, with everyone else, and notice what's happening in the conversation, and learn about the experiences that you might not have, because just because I'm not having them doesn't mean they're not happening. And so I think that's also really important, a point to kind of get people engaged in that conversation, help them learn, you know, about the experiences that they're not having. So just kind of tagging on to that as well.
Here's another question from Sarah Jones, who's also listening, from your neck of the woods, Bonnie, and it dovetails in with what you're talking about at the moment, which is, I'll just read it here in Sarah's voice, in my voice. My thought / proposition was that we could potentially join forces with Lean In, I don't know what that is, Lean In, and encourage Lean In circles across the spa and wellness industry to propagate female leadership and encourage young females in the industry. Any thoughts?
Well, this is a lead-in to what we've been talking about in creating a course or some ongoing forum for women in leadership through Green Spa Network. And Carolyn and I are working on a proposal for Green Spa Network to continue the discussion, but, you know, evolve it into a course. And I think the lean-in movement is it's happening around the world for women. And what I wanted to do also comment was tying in values conversation, and that is, you know, what are the values that we hold dear that are feminine and masculine, and looking at the positive in both masculine and feminine, and maybe that helps us integrate, you know, the styles more. But I think, Sarah, what I would say is we want to continue the conversation. I think this is a good time as we're wrapping up to talk about what's going to happen at Congress. That we're going to have 2 sessions at Congress for women in leadership. They will be repeating sessions, so that gives more women an opportunity, or men an opportunity to join the conversation. And there will be a small number of women leads who will be the touchstones for the conversation, who might just be the sparks for the discussion, and will be addressing issues and topics of interest similar to what we've done here and what we did on our first women lead call. We might send prompts of questions for you to consider before you come to Congress that will get you thinking, so we can engage in lively discussion at the sessions. And then we hope that we can continue, whether it's through the Google Hangout or an online program, and ultimately a course that will run for 3 months, 3 to 4 months in the year, and then we could repeat that course or build on it for another level for women, cultivating women in leadership. So that's what we're looking towards. And I think it's a great idea to check in with the Lean In movement and see if there's some collaboration there. There's so many women, emerging women events and activities that are going on online and in person, and women in business conferences. So I mean, there's a lot out there. So I think, you know, what we're excited about is just sparking the conversation here with our GSN members and how we carry it forward.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, it's happened again. Here we are at top of the hour, and the conversation is just really winding up and getting going. Not winding up as in closing, but winding up as in accelerating, which is marvelous. So we're going to take this forward to our Congress. In a second, I'll ask Bonnie, Carolyn, Kate, and Tara for any final words or comments they might have. But please visit greenspanetwork.org. That's .org for our website, and you can find out all the information you need about Congress and how to come and be at Devil's Thumb Ranch with us September 25th through 28th in 2 months. And I look forward to seeing you there. But wow, you know, women supporting women, women leading like women, how to balance the masculine and feminine, appreciation, respect, grace, empathy, intelligence, wisdom. You know, these are all words I plucked from just this last hour, and you know, so much about what sustainability is about and moving towards a sustainable future is about dealing with the situation that has resulted from a male-dominated business culture for many, many generations now. And so this issue is critical to opening and awakening to the value of things other than material and money, and bringing in a more balanced view as we all move forward. So if you're a human being, I don't care if you're a man or a woman or any of the other options out there nowadays, we respect and love them all, and invite everybody to Congress for this conversation and the other ones that will be happening as well. So panel, Carolyn, Bonnie.
That was so eloquent, Paul.
Beautiful.
Love you.
I love you too.
Thank you for ending it that way. I just wanted to put a little tidbit out there. What I want to share also at the Congress is how the collective power of women is changing the world right now. And there's these collectives that are coming, and they're changing major structures. One of them, you know, ousted a dominator in Liberia, and the first woman president was born there. And how they did it was about women coming together because something was, their kids were being really losing their kids in war. And there's stories like that and more of the collective through the rise of the feminine and how they're changing structures. So that's important too. So I want to just put that out there because we'll be talking a little bit about the collective power.
That's a juicy tidbit, Carolyn. I'm getting shivers just. Bonnie, Tara, Kate.
Bonnie, anything you want to say?
Well, I do. I feel really inspired, obviously, by conversation and by all that's happening right now. I think that the main thing is, you know, for us to look toward opportunity and towards the future, and this idea of collective support and collaboration and all that gives me such hope. So, you know, rather than us getting sidetracked into some of these places of competition, or some of the places we don't see a lot of positivity right now, I think that's where the power to change really is, to looking towards a real exciting future, and that we have this power to change, so we can use it, basically.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Last words?
Yeah, I wanted to say I think that in the spa industry, and we, you know, Carolyn's question keeps coming back to me. I want to really ponder it about how all of this relates to specifically to our industry. I think there's so much that we can explore there, but I think we have a unique opportunity in our industry, particularly because it is a nurturing, high-touch industry, and it is female dominated in terms of our clientele, and you know, I think in spa management, and then there's a little bit of a ceiling as it relates to hotel and resort management. But I think we have a unique opportunity to delve deeper and bring out the best of us. You know, what is the best of what we offer in our spa business and our spa industry and our community, and how do we share that with others, but in a bigger way that impacts on a larger scale. Because Carolyn, you just reminded us how women are, you know, in the game changing what's happening in the world. So we must remember that what we do has an impact on a much bigger scale. So that is really exciting to me.
I love listening to you speak, Tara. So with that, we're going to close this Hangout. Thank you, everybody, for being here and for watching. Anytime you want, feel free to share this video with anybody, and look forward to future Hangouts in the next few weeks. As we approach our Congress, we'll get to introduce you to some of our other amazing speakers and topics. So thank you for being here today, and we'll see you in Colorado in 2 months.
Looking forward to seeing all of you there.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.